Great. Um, yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Adegboyega, and I'm going to be talking about how I built a Vapor app how I built a trivia app with Vapor. Um, it might look simple, but it was an adventure. So in this self-talk, you're going to hear references to like Homer and stuff. So just be ready for that. Um, yeah. So, well, you can't see the screen, but on the screen there's a trivia app. And it's essentially a music gaming app. So during the pandemic, me and my friends, we came together and we built like a trivia app just to test like your music knowledge and stuff like that. Okay. So if you're a music fan, you should check it out. Um, next. Yeah. So this is how it looks currently. It's a simple website and a web app and an iOS app that just connects to a backend and allows you to like play games and stuff. Okay, cool. But before we get into all of that, let's sort of go back in time. So as far back as I can remember, I always wanted to make software apps products, which is a weird thing to always want to have done. So I understand that's weird. But before, well, or right after that, a little bit more about myself is um, I used to work as an iOS developer at a fintech company called GoMoney, sort of a digital wallet for people. It's based in Nigeria, where I'm from. Um, yeah. And before that, I used to be a full stack web developer at an agency. So a lot of some of the references I'm going to draw on the talk is based on my web developer experience, just things I've done in the past and just how it relates to Vapor. Um, Currently, I do like indie work, and so I've got a little journaling app in the App Store that you should definitely check out. Yeah, and yeah. So let's get to it. Um, in epics, it's always best to start in the middle. So in the middle of things, um, I googled that, so I don't know these things. Yeah, yeah. So right. So the middle of things in this particular case would be what the current architecture is. Currently, the Vapor app we have is a very sort of, I'll say, archetypical Vapor app. It's a monolith that has an API that connects to an iOS app. Um, and it has a database as well that is connected via the ORM Fluent. I think you might have heard a little bit about that during the talk. So currently the architecture is um, this, right? So firstly, let's take a look at the database layer of the architecture. Firstly, Vapor supports, Swift and Server actually supports different databases, SQLite, Mongo, MySQL, Postgres. And or you could use with the ORM, or you could use specific database packages such as Postgres, Neo, SQLite, Mongo, Keystone, ECC, and I'm sure there's probably going to be more in the future. So for this application, I went with Fluent ORM for communication with the database. So essentially, just the Fluent wrapper is like it's a sort of agnostic way to interact with your databases. You could be talking to like a SQLite database or like a Postgres database, and it would sort of be the same interface. And so that's why I went with the ORM because it's just pretty simple. Okay. So yeah. So back here we have the web app. Um, so let's take a look at that. Okay, good. So the website was made it's a pretty simple website. It uses Leafs, which is Vapor's templating library, as the HTML server. So that's what it serves. It essentially converts your Leaf files to HTML using Leaf. Yes. So this is like a page on the game. Well, obviously, and the logic here is pretty simple. You click on like an artist that sang a song. And this is very sort of timely because this is September and we all remember the 21st night of September, I hope. Yeah. So serving this page is as simple as using a get on a route, which is a thing you define on your server. So you sort of define the route, which is a particular page that you want your application, your server to serve. And then you could use a handler. So yeah. So this is like a very simple handler for this particular page. This page just calls the leaf template to look for play.leaf. And then go to the next one. Yes. This is the score page, for instance. It has all you'd sort of expect in a score page. But it's very interesting here because you could use sort of the templating library to like pass context from your sort of routes or your sort of your query parameters, and that is similar to what we're doing here. So if anyone's like obviously like website stuff is just you just have like a query in between like the URL and you could use it to do stuff. In this particular case, if you look at the second code block, it has essentially an if template where essentially if you have the category set, it displays a button, right? So if you, for instance, sent a link to somebody and the category wasn't displayed, it knows not to show you the try again because that is not their game. Okay, so yeah, so for instance, so this is what it is. Okay, so we also use template tags to sort of show different images for like different scores. So which is nice, I think. So if you did well, you get a good image. If you did not so well, you get a smirk. You could have done better. But if you did poorly, yeah, it's crying at you. Yeah, so that is so back to our architecture. So this is how it is, this is how it looks, more specifically. So let's take a look a bit at the business logic of it. In this business logic areas where routing occurs and API sort of calls are processed in the controllers. And so yeah, the website route sort of is the storage of, or in the application is the storage of all the pages we have. So if you're going to make a website with Vapor, you just simply essentially define where your files were if you're using something like Leaf and just like surf through it. Or if you needed to do anything in terms of like dealing with context, which is, like I mentioned, is like maybe you have to read from like a database to do a processing for how you show a particular page, and then you could pass it through as a context into the Leaf page, and then you could do stuff with it. So that's nice. Yeah. Good. So yeah. So yeah, API requests. I think Dean spoke a little bit about this before. Just yeah, so just use this as a reference, but don't use this as a canonical example. So what happens here is this is how we sort of serve the leaderboard page. You go through like the user DB, find out like what your scores have been over a particular time, and then we sort of send it out to you. This works on like the iOS app, for instance. You just like see what the scores of like most of the users are. If you actually do download the app, you might find that the leaderboard, some things are missing, and I'll get to that. So, yeah, it's part of the Misadventures. Yeah. So. Okay, so this is kind of like the breakpoints in the journey, in the sort of the story, the halfway points to, because now you're all caught up with like where we actually are, and I think now it's more important to talk about just what it is to sort of develop with Vapor as like an actual, developer. Because I think if you're developing something, it isn't really just about the technology you're developing for. It should be about what the thing you are developing is, I imagine. So if you're developing a game, you should start from an idea. You should start from like what you want it to be, as opposed to just the technologies that power it. But if you have good technologies, it's also really nice, just because if you get like to do what you love with what you have. So yeah. So the adventures. There are like three main components I would sort of remind myself if I was going to do this all over again from the start. It would be figuring out the environment, like what that was or what that is or what that could be in like an ideal state. Figuring out deployment and having observability in mind. Okay. So firstly, the environment. Yeah. Homeostasis. Yeah. So homeostasis is the process by which a system maintains a stable internal environment despite changes in external conditions. And I know you're asking yourself, like, what does that have to do with the environment? But it's very relevant in the sense where figuring out the environment you're building for at the beginning sort of helps you be consistent throughout your development process over time. And one thing to help with that is Docker, right? So Docker is a sort of software platform that allows developers to build containerized applications that work on in different OSs, environments, things of that nature. Yeah, and it starts with a Docker file. So this is a sort of a text file that contains instructions about how you should, how the Docker should build your Docker image, because everything starts from a Docker image. Okay. So for the app itself, for Lyriq, it started out with a Swift 5.9 Docker image, and then essentially we just built up from it in terms of like just, but this is just like pretty basic stuff. It's just all like the things you would need to do for almost every Vapor app that you put on Docker. So yeah. Okay. And part of like setting up your environments, if you're developing in Visual Studio Code or you're developing in Xcode, it's always good to have like syntax highlighting for like the webby stuff. So like if you're doing like Leaf on, you could have like the Leaf HTML plugin that helps with like with just rendering how it looks. So that's nice. Yeah, and you could have like a sort of you should have something to test your REST APIs with something like Postman or Insomnia. Yes, and in like testing out environments and stuff like that, you should be able to like, if you have like a different person working on your website, so you've got somebody working on your front end, it's always good to make sure like things like cores is properly set up, just so that they could have the same sort of experience as if they're developing on your local machine. So that's okay. So takeaways: simulating a production environment in your development environment as soon as you can. That's a good thing. You should sort of endeavor to do that as soon as you can. Use middlewares. Dean talked a bit about that earlier today. It's good to use middlewares to like go through like the chain of like say your course, because course was one of the issues I had with like a developer I was working with, where I was at first sending API requests to a person and he just couldn't consume it just because of just simple stuff like that. But all of these seem simple now, but I just didn't know it at the time. So yeah, deployment. This is an email I got from Heroku. So, because this app, I built it in 2020, and I kind of let it be for a while. And during the great like sort of price hike of Heroku, they sort of deleted it, which is it's one of the misadventures. But luckily, Fly.io allows you to do pretty much the same thing. I'd say but they don't have a free tier anymore, so it's pretty much mute. But essentially, you could do the same thing where you could have like a Dockerized app running on like a container on Fly.io, and it's just pretty easy to get set up, so it's not too complex. So you could just run the commands, log in, try to launch and deploy it. But this all works using like the Fly Toml file. Yeah, which is just like a basic description of what you want the Fly service to do for you. Okay, good. Well, and you can set environment variables using secrets, but you can also set it on the Fly dashboard for safety. Okay. Yeah. So migrations are also sort of a part of. They're a part of the history of like deploying actual products to the internet, because migrations kind of like tell the story of your application over time. And in this case, you could see like all the sort of tiny changes I've made over time to the schema of the database, just based off like the migration history. And it's really good. And sort of Fluent helps you with this, which is really nice. Yeah, great. So takeaways. This seems obvious, but like once you've deployed something, it probably should stay deployed. You should know that you shouldn't have like a case where like Heroku deletes your stuff and you don't know, and a client tells you that, hey, your stuff is down. Yeah, just yeah. I mean, I've happened to someone I know. Yeah, yeah. So also like use migrations to transition your database. I think Fluent works really well with a lot of the migration stuff. Sometimes, I mean, recently I had to do a little bit of SQL to make some changes, but it might just be that I don't really know the API as well as I should. Okay. Do. Observability is a good word. Yeah. So observability is a key tenet, especially in developing web applications, but developing software as a whole. And it's something that I think when I was sort of just pushing out something out, just like an indie thing, like I didn't really think of too much. But like if you are in production, you do need to like know some of these things, like what is going on with like your projects. And yeah, so I guess the three tenets of observability would be figuring out tracing, metrics, and logs. Um, Apple has like a really good dub talk this year about observability, so you should definitely check that out, and how you can use like a login system to and bootstrap it with your own services, I guess. And so that's really handy. Yeah. Okay, so future improvements. Um, One of the things, I don't know if you looked at the code, you might have seen like some event loops stuff, but it would be nice to like transition to structured concurrency. Structured concurrency, the whole new async await ways of dealing with like concurrency. That's a really good thing to do. So that is one thing I'm going to do with like just figuring out stuff. More observability for sure. More testing. Yeah, and give a quick recap of what I did. Yeah. So you should make the road by walking. So in this case, what that means is start with deployment in mind, and then once you get into like you should go coherently through like a problem. You should just not think about a whole solution or an architecture before you get started. I think that is what make the road by walking is. So start with deployment in mind. Um, yes, let the sun shine in. Use observability features to like understand what your product is doing when it's live, and your web app as well. So yeah, and yeah. Yeah, and lastly, yeah, you should do for love, I guess, would be the final thing, because there are a lot of reasons to build software or to make apps, and the reasons just can't be just based off like technical specifications, based off the fact that, oh, this is cool or this is like really nice technology. If you're starting from like a user POV, you should, start from what makes you as a user, because you're a user as a developer, like what makes you feel good. So Swift, for instance, on the server is something that you probably already know how to do. You already know how to do some Swift. So you should have those, that's a reasonable, as opposed to like just a rational explanation of why you should get started with something. So I think that is like what I would say is the key thing to take away. And lastly, just do for love and download my apps or whatever. Yeah, good. Yeah.